Kia ora and welcome, joined by men, councillors, plenty of staff, as well as Nigel, my very capable deputy, and KJ up here. So welcome to the first meeting of the Strategy and Planning Committee. I will start us off with a karakia. He honore, he karoria ki te atua, he mangarongo ki te whenua, he whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Hanga e te atua he ngāko hau, ki roto, ki tēnā o mātou. Whakatongia te warua tapu, he awhina, he tohu i a mātou, he ako hoki ngā mahi mo tēnei rā. Āmine. Okay, housekeeping. This meeting is being live streamed. Please make sure to speak closely into your mic and press the button to turn it on and then off when you're finished speaking. There are no apologies today, and the order of business remains exactly the same as written in the agenda. Does anyone have any interest to declare relating to this meeting? Okay, we will, in that case, hand it straight over to KJ and the team for the strategy and planning oversight.
Thank you. Whaia te iti kahurangi ki te tohu koe, me he monga teitei. Pursue which is precious and bow your head. If you bow it, let it be to a lofty mountain. I'd like to open with that whakatauki today as it speaks to the role of this committee to hold a high standard of oversight of our strategy and statutory responsibilities and to keep our focus on what will matter most over the long term. Tēnā koutou katoa and welcome to the first Strategy and Planning Oversight Committee. My name's KJ Dillon. And I'd like to start first by asking the officers that are supporting our governance discussion today to briefly introduce themselves. Thanks, team. Nelson City Council's Strategy and Planning Directorate was formed 145 days ago, and the oversight period for today focuses primarily on the first 2 months of the Directorate's existence. Today's session is a governance forum, and the intent of this discussion is to support your oversight of the Strategy and Planning Directorate's performance, risks, and forward focus. We do welcome your feedback. We want your questions and we want your challenge, particularly where you consider that further assurance, reprioritisation or direction may be required. As a reminder, this is a forum without decision-making powers, so any matters that are requiring decisions or formal direction will need to be referred on to full council. And in terms of our time together today, we do intend to provide a high-level overview before stepping through performance, financial position, key risks, and forward focus areas. We don't intend to go through team by team or restate the report, which we're taking as read. In terms of highlights, turning to the key highlights over the period, there are a few areas worth calling out. Firstly, in asset management and planning, the approval of the Water Services Delivery Plan is a significant milestone and one we're very proud of. In simple terms, it sets out how Council will continue to deliver and fund drinking water, wastewater and stormwater services over the long term. It's a big undertaking for Council, a 10-year program across water, wastewater and stormwater with an investment of around $483 million. The plan was approved by the Department of Internal Affairs, which provides assurance that our in-house delivery model is financially sustainable and supported by credible long-term investment programs. Together with the changes from the Commerce Commission, the Water Services Delivery Plan also positions Council well for increased regulatory oversight that is coming, with clearer expectations around performance, reporting and asset management. Other highlights include the fact that we've secured additional external funding through the Regional Infrastructure Fund for flood protection work, which is a really strong focus for the city, and it does reduce the pressure on ratepayers. A major area of work has been building our understanding of the proposed resource management reforms. These reforms will fundamentally change how planning is done, including moving to a single combined plan for each region and greater reliance on national direction. Council has taken an active role in that process. We prepared and lodged a detailed written submission with the Environment Select Committee and were invited to speak to it. At the same time, we've started work to understand the new system and what it will require in practice, including early work on spatial planning and identifying gaps in our current information. That puts us in a good position to respond to the reforms as they are finalised. In the strategy space, the annual report received an unmodified audit opinion, with 80% of measures achieved and a further 12.5% substantially achieved. That's a very solid result and reflects generally strong performance across the organisation. The Economic Events Program is also delivering, with good attendance across supported events and better tools in place now to assess value for money. In climate, there has been good progress through practical initiatives, including securing external funding for solar battery installations to improve resilience in key community facilities. In science and environment, there has been strong delivery on the ground, including planting programs, biodiversity grants, and continued investment in flood monitoring. In planning and city development, there has been steady progress on plan changes, housing initiatives, and city centre work. And finally, in forestry, there's been a step change in how the program is being structured, with a clearer focus on the opportunity, risk, prioritisation, and long-term transition. Taken together, these reflect a directorate that's delivering across a wide and complex program of work. Delivery pressures. Alongside this progress, we are operating in a period of increasing pressure, and that pressure is coming from three main areas. First is the scale and pace of the central government reform. Resource management reform, water services changes, and evolving expectations around climate adaptation are all significant. Taken together, they do represent a shift in the system that we operate in, with implications that are not fully yet settled. Secondly, delivery expectations at the local level. There's a strong expectation that we will continue to make progress on key priorities. In some areas where there is legislative uncertainty, we've taken a deliberate approach to sequencing work, pausing where necessary to ensure that we're not consulting or investing ahead of a clear national framework. This is about acting in the best interest of the community and avoiding rework and unnecessary cost. Third, affordability. Our cost pressures are increasing, and there is a clear need for us to balance our ambition alongside what is financially sustainable. This will come through more clearly as we move towards the next long-term plan. Trade-offs. What this means in practice is that we need to be really clear about trade-offs, what we progress now, what we stage, and where further direction may be needed. There are a few areas where this is most visible. The first is in our preparedness for reform. We're doing the work to be ready without getting too far ahead of decisions that haven't been made yet. The second trade-off area is around climate and environmental performance, where there's good momentum, but remaining reductions are harder and are going to require more targeted effort. The focus is on continuing to build progress while balancing that alongside affordability and wider economic pressures. The third is in forestry. This is a significant opportunity for Council, given the scale of the estate and the role it plays in managing risk, supporting environmental outcomes and delivering long-term value. The work underway is encouraging, and the focus now is on continuing to build on that and keeping it aligned with Council's overall priorities and financial position. Across all of this, the next 6 to 12 months are very important. The long-term plan is where all of these issues will come together, particularly around prioritisation, resourcing, and affordability. From a governance perspective, the role of this committee is to ensure that there is a clear line of sight across these issues, that the risks are well understood, and that the Directorate is well positioned to respond. And with that context, we'll move into the report briefly. Performance measures. In terms of performance, the Directorate has 4 measures covering environmental reporting, pest management, economic events, and the Council's own emissions. 1 measure has been achieved, 2 have not yet been measured, and 1 around emissions has not yet been achieved. The 2 measures not measured relate to state of environment reporting and the cycle that goes with that, and the economic events evaluation. So those results will come through later in the year. The emissions results reflect a change in trend, with increases in areas such as wastewater, landfill, and energy use. So while overall emissions are still well below the base year, the direction of travel has shifted. Work is underway to target those areas through the climate change strategy, focusing where Council has the most influence. The key point here is that performance is being actively monitored, and where results are not where we want them to be, there's a clear understanding of why and a response underway. From a financial perspective, the overall position is sound. Our budgets are generally well managed, and we're in a favourable position at this point in the year. There is, however, one area that we would call out, and that is around our forecasting for forestry, tending, and the road and path maintenance. This is showing an unbudgeted operating cost of around $846,000. This will be expected to be offset in future years, and a separate Council report will be received in April. The key point here is that it's understood and being managed well. I'd like to wrap up by talking about risks and challenges. Building on what I've discussed, the key risks and challenges that we see are, first, the reform uncertainty. So we've got key parts of the system that are not fully defined yet, which makes our planning and sequencing more challenging. The second is around the capacity and sequencing. So we've got a significant program of work. It's underway alongside reform preparation and the long-term plan, which requires careful prioritisation. The third risk and challenge is around affordability. Our cost pressures are increasing, and there'll be some hard choices that we'll need to work through as part of the long-term plan. So in my closing comments for this introduction, the common thread here is around keeping our effort aligned with the Council's strategic priorities. And looking ahead, the next 6 to 12 months are going to be very important, with a long-term plan bringing these issues together. At the same time, we'll continue preparing for reform, progressing key programs, and maintaining delivery. But overall, our focus will be on staying disciplined, keeping priorities clear, and making sure that we're well positioned to deliver as things continue to evolve. Those are my introductory remarks.
Cool. Thank you, KJ. Look, for the purposes of the rest of this meeting, we just have time to ask questions of our staff. Could I invite the staff to join us up around the table? The intention is not to go through the report section by section, but to really allow us to go where there's the most interest from elected members. I'll keep a note of who has a question, so if you just pop your hand up. If you have a question that particularly relates to what we're already discussing, give me an extra big wave, and I can make sure that we can have supplementary questions on that topic. All right, we're good to go. So yeah, questions. Go on, Lisa.
Yes, through the chair. Hi there, everybody. So my question is around the emissions targets, and so that 8.3% average annual reduction in Nelson's, Nelson's community-wide greenhouse gas emissions, which is totally 58% overall set for every year from 2025 to 35, to me is a bold target to achieve. However, it seems like it's not been achieved. Am I correct to say that? But I understand this target was implemented last year in July 2025. So it's very ambitious, but my worry is that it's not achievable. And having goals set too high could risk burnout, trying to achieve the unachievable. So bold's great, but doable is bettable for staff to deliver. So what's your thoughts on what I've just mentioned about our current climate emission targets? And am I correct that say that Nelson's 8.3% annual cut on emissions, excluding methane, is the highest set in council in New Zealand, in any council? And what would be a more realistic target percentage that would actually be achievable?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So you're correct in saying that these targets were set by council last year. In terms of changing those measures, that is something that could be discussed by this council through the next long-term plan process.
Okay.
Sorry, I'd just like to add, so we've got a target that's set through the climate change strategy, which is the 8.3% reduction that you're referring to. And then I just wanted to clarify that the performance measure that we speak to in our report actually relates to council specific emissions. I just wanted to distinguish those.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so so do you think that's a realistic target?
That's probably a matter for council to be considering, but it is just worth noting that the community emissions target is a huge sum of emissions, but it's not only council's responsibility. The emissions within council itself is what we are identifying in the report that hasn't been met.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
True.
Thank you. Through the chair. You mentioned the forestry and the road path maintenance overspend of 846,000 unbudgeted OPEX, and you said it's offset in future years, and we understand it's going to be managed well. So my question is, through the chair, could staff outline whether that April report that you mentioned on the forestry and the road path maintenance overspend will include governance options for managing the long-term plan implications?
Through the chair, the 2nd of April report will take councillors through all the detail in relation to this matter. The unbudgeted OPEX is a request for this financial year. So the future discussions on forestry systems budgets will also be part of the long-term plan process.
Okay. And then my other question is around the water service delivery plan and the DIA quarterly reporting. It's just more about, through the chair, just for my understanding, will the DIA quarterly report align with our existing governance reporting cycles?
So through the chair, I might refer this down to Phil Ruffle, who's just going to come over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the first quarterly report is due to the DIA at the end of April, so it covers that quarter from Christmas through to March. So it's pretty much in the same quarterly cycle that we run with council at the moment, anyway. And it effectively just looks at a very limited number of items out of our water service delivery plan.
Okay, and just to clarify, does the DIA reporting, does that sit within the operational process, or does it get escalated when needed to the governance?
Mr. Chair, at the moment, all we're really reporting against is the expenditure, capital expenditure against our long-term plan figures. So we're not making any decisions. It's a very operational issue. It's just a document to the DIA.
Okay, great, thank you. And then my last question, if that's okay through the chair, I'm jumping all over the place, is the Matahi and Bayview development agreements. Through the chair, will the timing of the infrastructure obligations in these agreements be reflected in the next LTP update? And is there anything that we as councillors should be aware of?
Mr. Chair, just as a bit of an update, the Mahitahi Bayview development, there's two development agreements, one with Mahitahi and one with Bayview. The Mahitahi one is progressing very well indeed. They've started to lay a significant portion of the wastewater and the water supply pipes up the Maitai Valley. And the Bayview development is working largely on our water reservoir just above Brantford Park, and we've done some very good preliminary test results for that. As each of the construction sections of that agreement are finalised, then we will have a better understanding of the actual costs. And any changes to those will be reflected either through an annual plan process or through the long-term plan process.
Minute.
My questions are firstly relating to the role of the Auditor General, and have had concerns about the very steep increase in the level of AG fees. Last year, we wrote to the Auditor General and noted that there are 14 councils that have had consent to be able to use alternative on it, and I'm interested in a number of elements of that. KJ, are you able to confirm our relationship with the AG and where that's going forward? And if I've got the wrong...
Through the chair, I'd like to redirect that one to Nikki Harrison. Thanks, Nikki.
Great, thank you. Through the chair, we received notification about a month and a half ago that Nelson City Council would be moving to EY as the auditor. And we've already had some preliminary meetings, and they'll be in to do an interim audit next month. And they've also confirmed that NELMAC will be moving to EY as well, which is a good result for us because the IHL Port companies are all audited now by EY as well. So.
And then my follow-up is some of our quite small council-controlled organisations. I give an example like the SUTA, which is not much more than a small business with a turnover of 1.3 or 4 million, having $40,000 a year in audit fees. Is there any prospect for us now that we have got approval to go with EY and we've got NELMAC, for us to have some of our council subsidiaries also benefit by moving to a private sector Auditor General?
So through the chair, a number of our smaller entities are already audited by smaller companies than EY. I know, and that's a relationship that Audit New Zealand, they're doing that on behalf of Audit New Zealand, but that's certainly something that we need to be mindful of. I know BDO do the museums audit, that sort of stuff. So a lot of the costs that come from that we have been trying to manage the costs within some of those smaller entities. In terms of managing the number of performance measures, for example, that they have, and making sure that they're as streamlined as possible to reduce that audit overhead.
And one of my concerns has been the very steep increase in fees for audit, where I think we had a 75% increase over the last 3 years. Are we able to have any prospects of either any direct savings or any indirect? The direct savings, i.e. the amount we get billed, or indirect, the amount of internal costs that the Auditor General pose on our collective team and requirements. Should I have any expectations, or is it wait and see?
I'll talk to that. Look, I've had a very good discussion with our auditor from EY and also with the Officer or the Auditor General in terms of our concerns around escalating costs. We Audit New Zealand set the costs for EY, so we can't negotiate on that price. But what we can do is just discuss with our auditors about what's appropriate, and also set the number of service levels that are audited as well is a direct link to what they charge to audit. Look, from my perspective, an audit is a really important assurance for me as Chief Executive that our organisation
is running well and providing good value for money to the ratepayer. So an audit is a really important thing. Sometimes what I've seen with Audit New Zealand, they were starting to stray into areas that were probably not within that assurance level. And I've asked both Audit New Zealand and EY to make sure they stick to their knitting and that they give me and governors the level of assurance that you need that we're running a tight ship. And hopefully by doing that, EY will be able to bring the cost down of that audit.
And two last questions on the subject. I've had a concern that we've had double up of central government agencies, and we had Phil report to us on the water services plan. My question is, for some of the people that are doing the practical work, is there potential with EY to reduce some of the duplication for council officers of having multiple government agencies over them? And then the follow-up question is, and what date and how does the transfer occur? In other words, for the annual report for 24-25, including the material we've got in today's report, is that still going to be a report from Auditor General? How does it fit with the annual report, long-term plan processes? Which bits are going to be done by AG, and when do we transfer over to EY?
So through the chair, in terms of the EY transition, it's for the year ended 25-26. So they're doing an interim audit in April, as I said before, and they're basically taking forward the relationship from there, and they will be auditing our long-term plan as well.
So just so I'm really clear, the annual report for 25-26 is being done by EY?
Yes.
Good. And then the other part is, do you think there's any potential for us to avoid some of the cross-government duplication across the water services, the Commerce Commission? We seem to have everybody demanding not dissimilar questions of our organisation.
I sympathise with the question, Mayor Nick, but let's suck it and see, and let's keep pushing for that. But look, the various organisations have their riding instructions and their needs, and they will need to assure themselves that. But we will keep pushing to make sure there isn't any duplication. And so, as the system beds in and settles down, I think there'll be an opportunity to say, "Hey, hang on a minute, you've got two organisations looking at the same thing." But I think in the first in the first year's operation, I think we're going to have to, suck it and see and keep pushing.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Yeah, through the chair. So I've just got a quick question about your new management asset management system. So the new asset and work management that replaced the RAMM, it's been live since last year, and I'm just wondering how that's all going, and is that helping with the parks and roads and all that, and how's it tracking, and have you found any issues, and have you found this system to work well?
So through the chair, I'll be referring to Carl on this particular matter.
Thanks, David. Yeah, just to be clear, I'm in charge of the sort of asset and activity side of the parks team, not the whole sort of entirety of council with asset management. But as far as the open spaces contract goes, it's been a massive, I think I mentioned in the report, a step change in the way we do things. So we've gone away from this sort of end of month claiming where there's one lot of information that comes through at a singular time to a system where we're getting much more up-to-date, much more live information coming through. So we're able to look at that information as it comes through in real time. The ability for us to then filter information, track data, all that kind of stuff is just so much more transparent. And the fact that our assets and our mapping is all linked in the same space just makes that hopefully quite obviously a lot easier just to sort of see and understand. And over time, it will make it easier for things like Lagoimas and official information requests for information.
Thank you very much for that. That's really informative.
Councillor Salad.
Thank you, Chair Hodgson. Starting with the financials, just a question, are the development contributions on that table somehow related to this directorate, or are they council-wide?
Through the chair, the finances mentioned in this report only relate to this directorate, and then of course where there's where it makes sense to sort of add a comment about the overall council picture, then that's included here. But specifically to DCs, that is only for this directorate, the Strategy and Planning Directorate.
Okay, thank you. And just in terms of the other column for expenses, so it's about the other row, it's about fourth row from the bottom. The year to date is a substantial less than budget, and the estimate full year is greater than annual plan by quite an amount. I just wonder if we have some commentary on the difference between the year to date, which I understand is up to December, and then the full year, and when that 0.9 million costs for forestry comes into the budget, how that all fits together.
Through the chair, so that 1.3 million favourable variance that you're seeing in the year to date basically boils down to timing differences in terms of budget phasing across the year. So we're looking for that to pretty much eradicate by the end of the year. And then in terms of the forecasting, that deficit is effectively that forestry OPEX coming through.
Thanks. And I know that's coming to council in April, but are you able to tell us exactly what that money was for and the circumstances around it?
Through the chair, that $1 million is in part for tending commercial forests, so making sure they retain their value and the logs are of good quality. And secondarily, for the maintaining the roading network, which is maintaining the drainage that goes alongside it, so it stays on the hill and doesn't fall off. And then there's some substantial investment in Glider Valley Road to enable harvest to occur in 26-27.
Right, and this is unbudgeted expenditure.
Through the chair, it's important to notice this is a closed account and there's no impact on ratepayer. So, and we'll obviously go into all of that detail with the paper coming to council next month. But want to be really clear, this is being James and team being really pragmatic about just moving that money to do some really good stuff. But there is no impact on ratepayer. This is a closed account.
Good point. So I take it this expenditure, you've started the role last year, I believe. You started digging down to it, making your plans, and you say, okay, we need to do this to look after the forest properly. It might not have been budgeted, but that's the origin of it all. This is what we need to do to manage everything to the standard we need and protect the assets. Is that the case?
Through the chair, yes.
Great, thank you. A few more questions if I can. The last line in that finance table has the words capital increased LOS, which I guess is level of service, I assume, but I was just wondering what capital increased LOS does mean. It's in the left, yeah, page 7. And it's the very bottom line. There's some green text. This is lower than budget by, and then after that, due to capital increased LOS.
Through the chair, so yeah, it is the capital increased level of service, and there's that $500,000 favourable variance because of a timing difference again. It's in the city development area. It's about 450k housing reserve. Yeah, so it's expected to be caught up by the end of the year again.
Okay, so there's just again phasing difference. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Moving on page 10, it stated around the Hope Bypass, Council's involvement is focused on the identification of impacts on transport networks, which is absolutely essential, I believe, because no information has come out from Waka Kotahi on the effects on congestion or traffic flows for any of the roading north of the proposed works area for the Hope Bypass. And I just think that's once stage 1 is complete, and maybe even we're moving to stage 2 of the Hope Bypass, there's just some possibility that we'll end up with worse congestion than previously on the roading network north of there, whether that's around Rocks Road or the inland route through Waimea Road and so on. So is council going to be, what do those words mean? Are we going to be doing transport modelling, or is there some other approach we're taking to assess that risk?
Yes, so through the chair, it's early days as far as the final design and the work is going away. So they've just engaged in that design contract. It will be a while before stage one gets underway. And what we're looking at working with them on is we've got looking at adding some funding in to do transport modelling. A little bit from us, but mainly coming from NZTA, because they need to understand the implications of that project on the rest of the network and the implications for Rocks Road. The key we're trying to understand at the moment is during that construction phase, if there's substantive disruption on the network, how do we manage that across the rest of the network, and how we are positioned to ensure that the rest of the network functions during that time. We've got quite a bit of work to do in that space, but at the moment we think we've got the time we need to do that.
Yeah, any rough timelines at all for doing that modelling work?
So we're looking at the modelling in the next financial year.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the current status is, even though we're in the design phase and that 70 odd million has been committed, we don't have any information on traffic modelling for flows anywhere north of the planned works on the Hope Bypass. Is that the case? We at this stage we have no information.
So they've done some work in their investment case. So that will be part of the work that they've done to date. And it's also important to note that their funding to date is for the development of the project. The delivery phase of that project is still yet to be funded. So there's quite a bit of process to go through before we're actually got a project that's been delivered on the ground.
Yeah, and so far I've only been able to find the 2-page summary of the investment case on the website. The full investment case plus appendices was meant to be out in November, and now it's been delayed to the end of this month. If you said the information is in there, is that a public document now?
I think the redacted version of the broader case is available, but I can confirm that and come back to you.
Thanks. And if you do have any of that modelling, if you could share it with myself at the very least, that'd be appreciated. Can I keep going, Chair?
Just a follow up from Nigel.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Sauer. Just a question on the funding and the NZTA, just on the same subject. Is there any indication from NZTA that we will actually get assistance for funding to do the council-related work associated with the Hope Bypass? Or is there an expectation from NZTA that the council will fund that work? I guess both in terms of the modelling, and then also if we need to make any changes, temporary changes to our network during the construction phase, who's going to pay for that?
So through the chair, in the general funding practices from NZTA, the development of that project would be funded from them as 100% as a state highway project. If there's corresponding stuff on the local road network, that would generally be funded at the council funding assistance rate. But we would need to develop that and put that through into the program, and that would become a component of our next regional land transport plan.
Minik.
Of the Hope Bypass, this strategy committee has an important role in the broader big picture. Are we doing work relative to council's priority of central city revitalisation on the importance of the Hope Bypass for the economic development of the city? In other words, of course, there are related costs to the infrastructure that goes with it, but are we doing work on what are the implications for Nelson if we continue to have a large bottleneck on our southern entrance, and the implications for the Nelson City economy, whether that's in terms of getting freight to the port, whether it's attracting Nelson people from Tasman to come into our city. So will we be doing any work with our Economic Development Agency or at the strategy level about the implications if the Hope Bypass is not built relative to those broader ambitions for council?
Through the chair, no.
Just a follow-up question from me. In terms of the funding assistance rate that we get from central government, my understanding is that we pitch our program to them, and if it hopefully aligns with their priorities, we then get that work funded, but we don't always get 100% of what we pitch funded at that 51% FAR. Do we get special treatment where it relates to something like the Hope Bypass and we know there will be flow-on effects? Is there any kind of special treatment from NZTA to make sure that everything connects well, or do we just pitch through the normal process?
Through the chair, we would pitch through the normal process, but part of the assessment of things that are put forward is an understanding of how they align with the government policy statement on transport, and that document is very supportive of the development of roads of national significance. So from a strategic perspective, we've got a base on which to build our case.
Councillor Stella.
Thank you. Moving on to climate change, thinking about community emissions. There was discussion in the previous term about how we track and report on those, and perhaps having a public-facing dashboard. It doesn't have to be live, but it's just updated at certain intervals with our targets and with our progress and so on. Is that still a piece of work that we aim to deliver? Some kind of dashboard that allows, in the interest of accountability and so on?
Through the chair, I understand there was an expectation we'd bring an annual report to council about our progress against delivering the climate change action plan connected to the strategy, and if I understand, that should still be scheduled for this year. So I can't speak specifically to a dashboard, I'm afraid, but I can take that away and consider that as part of that report. That'd be great if we could just get an update on that. And then another update, we told the community last year we'd be starting a adaptation engagement in the Wood as a sort of our first suburb before we take learnings from that to other suburbs. Just wonder if we can get an update on that engagement.
I'm happy to jump in on that one, KJ being so new and not. So look, this came to council, can't remember when, 6-8 weeks ago, and we made a resolution to take the Wood as the first cab off the rank for the adaptation process, and we were gearing ourselves up ready for that. What's come in place post that is very significant central government reforms and changes to the process. So there was no specific timetable put on that resolution from council. So I've taken advice, and that is an extremely important subject, particularly for those residents of the Wood, and it's important that we get it right. It's important that we understand the new government direction in terms of what the direction of travel that they're indicating. We don't fully know that yet, so we have taken the view that we need to get across that, and as soon as we can, we will then look to re-engage with that process. But I suspect what first cab off the rank would be having another workshop with elected members to bring you up to speed with the requirements of the new government reforms and how that potentially impacts on the Wood and other adaptation processes, and then look to restart that program. But until we have that further information, I've put that process on hold.
Follow up, if I could, is that a specific piece of legislation, and if so, at what stage is it at, or is it the national direction? What in particular are we waiting on?
Councillor, it's the Resource Management Act reform that's currently in place. We were expecting to have the 2 bills enacted mid-year.
Okay, so might a new revised timeframe be second half of this year for the adaptation engagement in the Wood, or is it too early to know?
I think we need to wait until the bills have been enacted, and following that we will schedule a workshop as a priority with councillors to discuss further.
Supplementary question from Nick.
It was on a similar line to Councillor Stella. The government has promised a climate change adaptation bill, quite specifically to provide us guidance around how we would deal with issues in the Wood. Does any member of staff have any update, either as Executive Director or others, as to the government's timetable for the introduction of that legislation?
Through the chair, no, we don't have any update at this stage. So that is a separate piece of legislation to the resource management reform bills. But no, the answer is no. We don't have an update. Thank you.
Keep going.
I mean, I do have more, but aware of the time. If there's another councillor with a large list of questions, or maybe I'll just do one more and then come back to me later. It would be good to get some commentary around, maybe from the CE, on the report rightly mentions a risk around staff capacity, especially with developing regional plans and so on. So it'd be good to get an update where we're at in terms of, I know in the previous term we had councils around the country had high turnover rates and so on. Has that stabilised? Are there any teams that are particularly understaffed or under-resourced at the moment? I would certainly be interested in hearing about the planning and climate teams, because they've been in a state of flux, and just any other update you can give about any challenges in terms of staffing levels and capacity.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Stallard. Look, a really important question and something I've been talking about for a while now. We are facing intergenerational reforms of local government, and very aspirational program in terms of change to the way that councils operate. So that is, and as a unit, just a small unitary council, that's bringing its particular challenges for us to grapple with, and indeed, some of the downstream impacts of those reforms are still being worked through right now. So even the government I don't think, fully knows quite where it's all going. So we've got to be cognizant of that. On top of that, we've got an extremely ambitious, and quite rightly, agenda for this council in terms of Bridge to Better, in terms of community hub and library, where we're heading with that. Many things that we're bringing to fore, bringing Connings to town, bringing lots of new things. We're looking at the waterfront. We're taking a lot of work on. So the staff are exceptionally busy at the moment. And on top of that, of course, as you well know, I'm leading Shaping Our Future, which is a much needed look at the way that we operate. We've looked at our operating model, which I just haven't to have here, which is available for the public on our website. And that was a staff-led exercise in terms of how we want to be as an organisation, and it describes across the board how, from a governance through to management, through to customer engagement, many things as to how we're going to be in the future. On the back of that, I've Phase 1 org design. I've brought in 4 new executive directors, not all new, 2 existing, 2 new, and I'm about to head into Phase 2 of the org design, and this is well, I'm leading up to your question, Councillor Starr, but it's an important context. So we are having a fundamental look at our capability across the organisation and what we need to deliver the services that we should do, and where we've got capability gaps, where we've got the teams under stress. Well, I'm really pleased to say that, notwithstanding any change process is always stressful for staff, notwithstanding that, we've actually brought down our turnover from about 16% to 12%. And I had a discussion with the Chief Executive Employment Committee a couple of weeks ago about this. For me, that feels about right. It's always difficult to know how much turnover should be. When I was in the military, I know the Air Force had a turnover of about 6%. That wasn't healthy because you don't change, you don't get the changeover of staff. So I think between 10 and 12% is about right. There's different opinions amongst HR professionals on that, but for me, it feels about right. And I'd say broadly, staff they're on the journey with us on shaping our future, and feel we're doing it well. But we are now meeting that. We are going into a period of change, which will worry quite a lot of staff. I'm going to be the first to admit that. Changing all design these people to worry about their roles and what's coming for them. And I'm going to be talking to, I don't want to say too much here because I'm going to be talking to all my staff next Tuesday about the process and where we're heading to, but we will be consulting staff around org design Phase 2 in the not too distant future. So I think that's so look at your question about climate change staff and science and environment and all those things. We're looking at all the organisations across the piece, see what capability we need, and we'll be engaging with staff. I think the key message to governors is that this is not a saving exercise. We're not looking to save costs through this. We're looking to be a council that delivers to the customer, delivers to the environment, our natural environment, that we deliver all the responsibilities of a regional council. So this exercise is not about saving cost. We, of course, at every angle look at value for money and make sure we're not wasting any money. But as I will be reinforcing to staff next Tuesday, this is not about getting rid of people. This is about making sure we've got the right capability in the right place to support your aspirations and the strategic intent and the LTP.
Happy to pause for now. If there's more time at the end, I would have some more, but thank you.
Let's jump over to Councillor Rainey.
Thanks, James. I have a question about process, really. I mean, firstly, I want to thank KJ and the team for a very solid report. You know, and the structure of the report really expresses clearly the quantum and the quality of the work during that period of July to December last year. My concern is that the structure of oversight committees means that we have the opportunity to look at these things in a shortened period of however long this meeting is going to end up being. Every, how many times are we doing this? 3 times a year. As opposed to in other iterations of elected member oversight of these kinds of things where we met more regularly. So obviously the onus is on elected members to go through the report and to pick out things that concern them and to develop questions. However, I wonder whether, as part of the process, James, you might want to give consideration to this, is whether we could, either have staff highlight concerns or issues or developing trends, potential, or whether the issues that are brought up in the meeting today, are they just going to be reflected in the minutes? What is the feedback process on these, or is every individual staff member who's answered a question going to go away and come back and send an email back to Aaron or whoever? Or would there be an opportunity for an issues register? I don't know what the correct term is that accompanies the report. So the next time we have the oversight committee, potentially we could. Now, I don't want that to become a huge amount of work, but it may well be that it could be on the issues register it's resolved or whatever. I don't know. And the final reflection is that the role of the Strat committee, or is that a role of the other committees to undertake that kind of picking up on things? So I'd just be interested in your thoughts, either James and KJ.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Rainey. I think it's a good question, and it leaves me some things to go away and think about as well. My view of the committee is that it is a chance to dig a little bit deeper into the activities within the directorate. Now, there may be things that come up from our conversations where we go, okay, we need to maybe in the next committee look a bit closer at that in particular. Or it may be that as we're reading through the reports, you might say, James, we need to spend a bit more time on this particular topic. We look at, for example, our policy pipeline. We might need to take a closer look at that. And I think that can happen through the committee. In terms of how things are recorded in the minutes and tracking from meeting to meeting, I take guidance around the kind of best practice to keep track of things, but also just to reassure you that KJ, Nigel and myself meet very regularly to discuss the different things that come up in between meetings as well. So if something comes to the front of your mind in the interim, you're always welcome to raise that and we can bring it up for discussion.
Well, thank you. Subsequently, I presume somebody's taken some kind of record of the questions that have been asked. I can't even remember half the questions that have been asked, especially yours, Lisa. So I think that you can't rely on, I'm a very stable genius, but I don't think I'm going to remember everything that's come up. So.
Well, look, I'm taking notes, but I'd be interested to hear from KJ as well.
Through the chair. Obviously, this is a new instrument of governance that we're trialling at present. So this is the first time we've run this particular type of oversight committee, and with the meeting frequency of 3 times a year. My understanding is that we're going to try this for 12 months and then take a look to see how it's gone. What I'd like to do is to work alongside my colleagues just to do a bit of a debrief around how this has gone. And I think that will involve each executive director having a conversation with the chair and deputy chair. And if we need to make some adjustments, those will be ones that we'll consider as we go through. Thanks.
Can I just add to that? And I'm more than happy for Nigel to comment as well. The purpose of these oversight committees is to give councillors proper governance oversight into the performance on behalf of our ratepayers for what's going on. There's never going to be a perfect balance between the level of information we get that can be far too detailed, and I take things sometimes like the activity management plans that are 800 pages long, and they're almost so long that it's just lost in the noise. And I do think that elected members through the chair need to provide feedback to KJ on, there's no question of the quality of the report. It's good and we're learning some stuff, but getting that balance right, and equally so with the frequency. And we are trialling with a 3 for a start. It needs to be frequent enough that elected members are getting insight into where things are going wrong before we have the capacity to intervene. But not so often, or the report's so extensive that our staff are spending more time writing reports than doing stuff for the ratepayers. And there's an honest balance to have there. And I think as the process evolves, without people being sensitive about the reports being perfect, we should allow the process to evolve around that core principle of governance members being able to get sufficient oversight rather than just once a year of the detailed work that's going on in each area. That's my take on it. I don't know whether the Chief Executive wants to comment further. And the other thing of which both Nigel and the Executive Directors need to do is I would prefer that the 3 oversight committees were sort of operating at a similar level. In other words, I don't want one getting deeply into the detail and one being far too high view. I do expect across the organisation to Nigel and the Executive Directors to get some level of consistency across the 3 different directorates.
We have committed to reviewing the process in November, and we will certainly do that. And as KJ says, we'll always look at improvements as we go along. Look, I've sat through all 3 today, and we haven't quite finished this one yet, but I have to say I really enjoyed. It was great to have a focus on customer experience this morning. That was a good start. Bridget, well done, and Trudy for chairing that. It was because we've never had that focus on customer experience, and that governance really challenging the team around where we're at. So I actually quite enjoyed that conversation. And look, I thought it's a great opportunity with Alec and his team leading us through the delivery space. What I really like in the delivery space is we no longer have these silos, and that we've got a parks team saying this bit and transport doing this. We've got Eddie, and we've talked. That is the manager of delivery, which is making sure we've got it coordinated. And there was a question this morning in delivery around making sure we don't dig up the road twice for different things. And that's what Eddie and the team are going to be making sure that we are coordinated and look for to have a focus on strategy. So look, what I've seen today is a really good debate and discussion and challenge, and I think it feels to me about right. But of course, we're always open to a different way of doing it. One thing I would say, Mr. Mayor, is please don't say to Mr. Light that he can have activity management plans of 800 pages long, because I've said that is never happening again under my watch. So we're not allowing that. So don't give him that license. Thank you very much. But yeah, Councillor Brown.
Thanks. Through the chair, sorry, Councillor Roney got me thinking about Lisa's questions, and then I now can't remember what the answer was, so I'm going to ask it slightly differently. So it's just for clarity, because on page 9 where it talks about this performance measure has not been achieved, and I just want to come back for clarity for myself, is the emission increase expected to affect our upcoming statutory planning work when I just factor in what we've heard from the Chief Executive as well? So
through the chair, so the performance measure that's dealt with in paragraph 22 of this report are the council's performance measures in our long-term plan. Does that answer the question?
No, I thought you just clarified my question. I'm sorry. I'm asking if the expected emissions increase there will affect the upcoming statutory planning work. So will we have to reorganise or do something different, or, and I'm just recalling what Lisa was talking about, you know, targets not being achievable, but better off having something that you can do. But that was, I don't know, because you mentioned that, are we talking about the community climate change plan with the thing, or are we talking about the council thing? So I'm coming back to 22, number 22, there on page 9. And I just want to know.
I'll start if I may, and then staff can jump in. But look, I mean, I'm really proud that this council has brought down our own emissions, and I am very much focused on the emissions of this council. Look, I was on record of saying that, and I sort of agree with you, Lisa, that a regional target was very, very high. And I said publicly, I thought it was too high, and I'd rather be set a target that was more achievable. So I'm very much focused on bringing down emissions, and I'm disappointed that our emissions are starting to go up. So I've asked my climate change team to really focus on their thinking on what can we do practically to bring down the emissions of this council, whether that's solar or other things. So I'm really laser-like focused on that, and I want to see that coming down. So that's a critical thing for us as a council.
So on that, how are we measuring and capturing that? Because I come back to, and we were talking about auditors before, and previous auditors on our long-term plan have mentioned how we as a council, I talk in the royal we, I'm not talking as in we. I'm talking in the royal we as council, that we expect a lot from our CCOs or CTOs or external organisations to hit emission reductions or climate change, but we weren't actually putting the same accountability on ourselves. And that came through the auditor. And then he talked about how we measure that there was different methodologies, and it was about finding the one that fits. And I'm thinking EY maybe has this methodology worked out so that we can measure it adequately. And then number 22 around our statutory planning work will reflect that. So I'm just trying to figure out how's that. Sorry, it just got me thinking with the questions.
Through the chair, in terms of what the new legislation and new policy statements will expect of local government, that's still an uncertainty. So we don't know what those requirements and standards will be. The reference to how reductions are measured, I think you'll recall that our climate change team explained that the auditors and the scientists have a difference of opinion in how emission reductions are measured. And so that is something that we will need to work through with our new auditors for the next audit.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we come back to Councillor Stallard? Oh, is it
it's
on the
relevant for this, if I could.
Yeah, big wave of it.
Got something to say about climate. So that community target was not something we developed independently. We were aligning ourselves with the government's Paris Agreement, nationally determined contribution. So our line of thinking was the government set it as a national target. We can have the best chance of making progress if we align our targets. So that was the basis of it, and the understanding that we would do our share, and that if everyone did their share, we might, make some progress. With regards to measuring emissions, community emissions, we will get to a stage in this process, which is probably now, when mitigation is the same as adaptation, especially when it comes to energy and transport. So most of our emissions in Nelson are in transport. If we can electrify as much as possible, then we're reducing emissions, but we're also resilient to shock, because that's probably our future if we're still on fossil fuels, whether it's geopolitical or the energy cost of energy increasing and so on. So, and I would like to see probably more positive wording in our discussions around mitigation and meeting our targets and so on, focusing on opportunities, because we hear a lot of talk about this is out of our control and we have limited levers and so on. We have a lot of control over transport in this region, and transport is our number one source of greenhouse gas emissions. So I think if the wording could be more around opportunities, and another area where we could potentially change our thinking a little bit is around costs and benefits. And for every vehicle we had shifted from fossil fuels to electric in the past 5 years, and the current high oil prices, that's win-win for the driver. It's reduced emissions. There's a scramble now, and we increase our resilience to shock. So I think these investments, we can sometimes think of the cost of taking action, whereas in fact the benefits are outweighing the cost. And there's plenty of literature out there that says the most costly path forward is our business as usual and being reliant on fossil fuels. So I just think that's something we can bear in mind when we, in terms of the words we use when we talk about mitigation. At some stage, if there is time again, I do have some more questions, but happy for other elected members to talk.
Sure. I'm mindful that a couple of us have to head off at around 2:45. So aspiring to conclude the meeting by then. But I think the remaining questions are back to you, Councillor Stallard.
Thanks. With this being a strategy and planning committee, obviously strategic priorities are really important, and we have our existing priorities from the 24 long-term plan, and we've started the process of looking at the priorities for the 27 long-term plan. And I know most of that discussion has been held in confidence to date, but I wonder if the CE would like to give an update to the community on the process and timelines and so on, because we will go out for consultation early next year on the long-term plan, but we're currently in a state of flux. We've talked a lot about priorities and how we reorganise the organisation. What is the basis for that in terms of are we sticking with the 2024 strategic priorities when do we make the switch over?
Thank you, Councillor Stallard. Look, I thought we started the year exceptionally well at the end of January with a strategy day and a good discussion around broad themes, and we've brought that together under a number of workshops and a number of discussions, and we have been, as you know, reviewing our strategic priorities. I'm not going to say what those are now, because obviously I think that would be inappropriate. But what we are planning to do is bring a paper to the May Council with those strategic priorities. I think we've had broad consensus around those. I accept there are different opinions in the room, but broadly, I'd say my categorization of the meeting was we've had a good consensus around landing some new strategic priorities. We intend to bring those to the council meeting in May so that the public will see what those priorities are, and that's kind of what I'm really proud about is that we worked with iwi over a year ago, and we understood from the Te Tau Ihu across the 3 councils and the 8 iwi what the collective priorities are for councils and iwi, and we've landed those, and those are starting to appear in our activity management planning. And I would like to land these strategic priorities from our council perspective, because they are going to be shaping the activity management planning process that David Light is leading. You're not leaving yet, David, unless you get an 800-page report. And we will be having workshops. So we're bringing to you the chapter 1 of a single document of activity management planning, which will have 8 chapters, which we'll be starting to workshop those during the course of this year, and then we'll be consulting the public on those in around about March next year. So look, I'm really pleased with the progress we've made in terms of our strategic priorities, and the public will see those in May.
And I think, just as the chair of this committee, in relation to the long-term plan, this committee has the responsibility for oversight of the Strategy and Planning Directorate, but the long-term plan is a process held by the full council. And so if there were issues within the directorate around capacity to deliver the long-term plan, perhaps that would be a question that might come up here. But relating to the long-term plan in and of itself, that's a process that's underway through the full council.
Thank you. The process of shaping our future, a lot of resourcing tied up to that, rightly so. And there's been something of a sort of a no new work directive or within council for good reason. How far through that process are we? When might we be saying new work?
Yeah, good question, Councillor Stallard. and look, again, I'm going to be talking to staff about this on Tuesday, so I don't want to say too much in the public space ahead of talking to staff. But look, I've been clear that we've got to land the new government reforms. We've got to land all the business as usual work that we're committing to. Just the community hub and library discussion in itself, it's a massive piece of work. The Bridge to Better, massive, the biggest engineering project that this council has ever seen. So there's massive pieces of work on. So I've said, look, to get through all of the reforms, to get through our shaping our future reforms, we've got to, take some of the stress out of the organisation. That's why I've sort of been pushing this no new work mantra for quite some time. And I know that frustrates some staff, because they're very, very passionate and they want to move things forward. But I need people to focus on getting the reforms right. And getting people, and I'm delighted with the level of engagement that we've had from staff in all the workshops we've had. In fact, I'm also delighted with the engagement we've had from elected members as well. They've shown a real clear interest in what we're doing. So it's really important we get that right. So look, unashamedly, I'm saying to the public, we've had to delay a few things, and it's like, and I'll be honest, it's taken a little bit longer than I'd hoped in the no new work, but I will be saying to staff, we're still in that phase. I want to land the org design phase 2 well, but once we've got that in place, we've got to embed those teams. We've got to get the leadership right. We've got to get them humming. We've got to get the culture right. So I know you won't like this answer, Councillor Stella, but really I think we will be able to start the new work stuff next year. It's really this year we're focusing on getting everything right. We're not saying we can't do any new work. If there's sensible things to do, we're having a discussion around dog attacks and that sort of thing. That could be new work, but we're saying it's right that we have that conversation right now. So we can. The executive leadership team, under my guidance, will of course, and indeed under the elected members' guidance. If you as elected members say it's critical we consider this new work, of course we will consider that. But I've got to be conscious of not breaking my team during a period of really challenging time, and so I'm pushing the mantra without shame that we're not doing too much new stuff at the moment. Yeah, Councillor Brand.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. You said this year. Are you talking fiscal year or calendar year?
Oh, calendar. Sorry.
Just one quick one to finish. The Hill Country Reserve Strategy and Operational Plan. I think that's new to me. What is that plan, and what are does it exist, or is it being developed, and what will it do?
Through the chair, it's a piece of work, Councillor Stella, that we're seeking to develop over the next 2, 3, 4 months, and we'll bring the finished plan to council for ratification.
That's all from me. Thank you for the patience.
One quick question from Councillor Brand.
Yeah, sorry. I just thought before, the water celery and the Vietnamese parsley, you've done the control thing, stage 1, and then you've said that you're going to start control 2. I know the residents in this area are very invested in this work. Can you just explain a bit more about what the control 2 is that's getting started, and when it started and how long it's going for?
Through the chair, the water celery and Vietnamese parsley control program is an ongoing program, and there are a couple of control rounds a year which involves spraying the weed species with chemicals, and there is some timing considerations around that. So some of the streams it's present in border on schools, so school holidays, we tend to time that work. And you also have to get a certain amount of mass. You don't want it to get too big or have not enough to really manage that. So it's 2 pulses a year at the moment. If you want more detail on that, we can get that through to you.
Oh, no, that's great. I just needed to be aware because I know some very active residents in that space, and I know I'll be hearing all about it.
Was there one further question from Councillor Austin?
Yeah, through the chair. Just a quick question about Jenkins Creek, really. And I've just seen on Facebook on the website that we're about to start work along the creek, and I'm just wondering how progress is going with that, or if there's any delays, milestones or anything like that, just with the Jenkins Creek, with the flooding and infrastructure fund.
So through the chair, I think that's the work relating down closer to the airport, and I think that we have approved detailed design and should be signing for contract pretty soon with the hope of starting this financial year, but I will check if that's, I need to check the report and see how that correlates to what advice I'm giving you. But I think that is the correlation.
It's to do with the stop bank, yeah.
Yes, it's to do with the stop bank in the airport. Yes, yes.
Good.
All right. If there are no further questions, can I thank everyone for the engagement, for the questions. Thank you, staff, for the insight and expertise you've offered. I will close the meeting with a karakia. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te atawhai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, ake, 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 amine. Thank you.